Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and we believe that what got the LGBTQ movement to where we are today, meaning contemporary modernity, is primarily because all of the people in the past who were harmed, who made sacrifices, and even some people who were killed or sacrificed along the way were really a function of these people not turning their back and rejecting the movement, but being able to push it further, to be able to have better discussion, even if in many instances things aren't always perfect, fine, and dandy. Of course, we live in the real world where we have conflict, and that's exactly the point in which we have to deal with it as individuals. We believe that this contemporary LGBTQIA plus movement is more than just the mainstream or liberal representation that the previous speaker deduces it to be. That is to say, we think that as a queer person, rejecting the contemporary movement undermines the progress that we've already made and is likely to be able to destabilize and potentially create infighting within the movement, which does more harm than good. The push coming from opening opposition is going to be clear. We think that it's not justified for an individual to be able to do this on the count that it becomes an affront to what you are supposed to stand for, and it becomes detrimental to the very individuals that you are actually trying to clamor for. Because I understand that the contemporary movement isn't perfect, but you can't just lock in and assume that one particular strand of it or the majority is particularly bad. I think there's a problem-solution mismatch coming from the previous speaker. A few key points of framing before I move on to my argumentation. Other responses will be integrated. The first is, this is a value judgment debate, not about the contemporary being good or bad, but whether or not, as an individual, you have the prerogative to be able to reject it or not, and we're gonna look at that from a principled and practical perspective. Meaning, the burden push I want to push on side proposition is to be able to really explain what rejection looks like. Because on one hand, you have opting out and fucking off and disassociating yourself. But I think they also have to take on the higher burden of rejecting it, which is to say that you're going to actually go against it and even to the extent not support it and be able to push back against these particular ideologies, which we think is different from just having discourse, because discourse can still happen and is better likely to happen at the point in which you're able to support it. And here's the kicker, right? You have to understand what really is the contemporary movement. Because I don't think it's correct for the previous speaker to say, majority, modern, progressive, liberal, that's contemporary. We think particularly we have to understand that the contemporary movement, as I said in my pre-oration, is really a function of everything that has happened in the past. From the Stonewall riots to where we are now, wherein we're able to even branch out and co-opt the trans movement, who otherwise before was a separate kind of movement. We're all literally now able to go under this rainbow umbrella to truly fight for the idea that whether you're bi, whether you're asexual, whether you're queer, whether you're lesbian, gay, or trans, you literally deserve the same kind of treatment as a heterosexual people who are considered to be not normal or normal have really wanted to fight for. And we think what we uniquely have to understand is the intersectionality that actually is characteristic of the contemporary movement in and of itself become the very solution to the harms that the previous speaker accuses it of. Because guys, the motion isn't this house opposes rainbow capitalism, or the movement isn't this house believes that the progressive left queer movement does more harm than good. We think it's completely fair to be able to say that this contemporary movement exists in a spectrum of the Overton window and political sensitivity that actually reinforce the ability of it to actually check itself, wherein we're able to have particular discourse and discussion to the point that these things are going to be able to lead to more fruitful outcomes. Before I proceed, POI, whoever raised it, go for it.
Does rejecting the contemporary LGBTQ movement mean giving up on fighting for queer rights as a whole?
I don't know. I'm an op, so it's up to you guys to define that. But I think if I were to build the case for Gov, I would say that rejecting the movement is a function of being able to fuck off and not opt in to the mainstream, because there are instances where it's completely justified for me to march to the beat of my own drum and be able to disassociate and not de-radicalize the movement. That's something that you guys can build. I'm going to respond to that. My first response to what I just said, which is a point for side proposition, is to say that there's a difference between being able to do something and actually having to do something. Meaning, just because they can fuck off or just because they can go against it because they think it's good for them, is exactly the point in which they should question whether or not they should do it. Meaning, there's a moral impetus to the idea of it being justified, and we think for the account of principle and practicality, it's not justified to go against it just because you fundamentally have a different belief. Meaning, there are instances wherein you can have a better quality of discussion, wherein you're actually able to be empathetic to them and share your opinion, as opposed to being hostile. Why? And here's the comparative. On both sides, there's discourse. But on their side, the discourse you have is simply more adversarial. It becomes a me versus you, a left versus right. That in and of itself radicalizes the different ends of the movement even more and actually create this confirmation bias and narrative of who is right and who is wrong. It makes it about the in-groups and the out-groups, the mainstream versus those who are more fringe, which we think is particularly harmful and we think can actually exist at the point in which you can be empathetic. We are very proud to stand on side opposition.